Chapter 1. Do you like ants that much? Korea University Art Museum. Lim Do-kyun, an assistant professor in the art department, flashed a tired expression upon seeing Suho's painting. The ant painting was tightly attached to the wall of the exhibition hall. It includes all kinds of sketches made with oil and watercolors. There were various kinds of ants with different forms as well. Assistant Professor Lim attached the name tag he had brought under it. Korea University Art Department Project Exhibit. RD Year Sung Suho. There would be a truckload of drawings if we include all the ones you made since you were a freshman. Why not go to the entomology department instead? I also considered that, but there's no separate ant major. So you only like ants and not insects? Yes, sir. Strangely, I have liked ants since I was a kid. When I found a swarm of ants, I walked carefully so as not to accidentally step on them. Since you were little? You have an unwavering taste then. Assistant Professor Lim smiled and continued to look around Suho's painting until something caught his attention. This ant looks different. In front of him is a painting of a human-shaped ant with a black haze. The strokes are dynamically great. You draw monsters too? Monster? No, I just draw what I dreamt of when I was little. You're really something. Just how much did you like ants that you even dreamed of them at a young age? Before the cataclysm. Cataclysm. It was a term used for the catastrophic event that suddenly came to Earth 2 years ago. Unidentified gates appeared all over the world. Terrifying monsters entered through those gates and invaded Earth. Fortunately, very few humans happened to awaken their ability, and mankind managed to overcome the crisis. That was only 2 years ago. At that time, Suho was just 20 years old and was a freshman. He started having consistent waves of ant dreams when he was in middle and high school, or long before that. Anyway, you're also a weird one. Assistant Professor Lim smiled and carefully looked at Suho's painting again. You drew it really well, though. It feels like it would pop out of the picture and bite me. Ah, is that too much? I guess that's just how vivid your painting is. Suho silently laughed at that. It has to be. It wasn't simply an art or depiction of his dream, but because it was a monster that would rush to kill him as it appeared in his dreams. Looking back, it was a really terrible dream. Suho said as he recalled it. Your level increased. Your level increased. In that dream, Suho had to fight for his life with the monsters without knowing why. There were armored knights and ant legions that endlessly blocked his way, and a giant dragon appeared after. Upon killing those monsters, he leveled up just like in games. Even if he dies, everything would instantly reset. He had to go back to the beginning and restart everything from level 1. The only way out of that dream was to somehow survive and reach the final boss's room. After fighting non-stop like that, he managed to reach that room, and to his surprise, the face of the final boss resembles my father. Suho smiled bitterly, as he considered it only an absurd dream in his puberty. However, from some point on, he never dreamed of it again. That's probably around that time. Yes, to be exact, somewhere in the 10th grade. Ever since his parents went missing, Suho's daily peaceful life collapsed. Around that time, unusual things were happening in the corner of the museum building. You left them here? Yes, senior. The assistant professor told me to keep them here. The art department students opened the door to collect the paintings. Their eyes widened as they saw it. Huh? A black portal floating in the air. Isn't that a gate? Hurry and report it! The students panicked and backed away. One took out his cell phone with trembling hands to report it right away, but the fourth-year senior urgently stopped him. Calm down, it's a closed gate. Ah, that's right, the blue mist hasn't come out yet. Yeah, the dungeon break is still a long way off. That freaked me out. They sighed in relief upon their late realization. Dungeon break is a term used to refer to the phenomenon of monsters pouring out of the gate. The appearance of a gate does not immediately trigger a dungeon break. Prior to that, a blue mist flows out of the gate and pollutes the surrounding area, so that the gate could open and monsters could come out. That means we're still safe. Senior, why are you laughing like that? It's still dangerous. Shouldn't we report it immediately? You idiots. Haven't you heard the rumor? You can be awakened if you consume the blue mist. The senior's words made the junior's ears perk up. The composition of the blue mist has not yet been clarified. However, such a rumor spread secretly on the internet like an urban legend. It said that the mist was actually vaporized magic, and it was rumored that even ordinary people could awaken their magic skills immediately by consuming it. Wasn't that just a baseless rumor? It wasn't proven to be one. Well, hey. So, let's check it out this time. Who knows? There might be an S-class hunter among us. The junior's eyes changed rapidly due to the senior's words. The unimaginable amount earned by S-class hunters came to their minds. Since the corpses of the demons and the ores of the dungeon became popular as new materials, the job of a hunter who can sweep all the goods has become a symbol of wealth and glory. However, it has been only 2 years since the cataclysm occurred. It was not clear yet how to awaken one's magical power. Besides, you guys know that Assistant Professor Lim awakened as an E-class hunter, right? Of course. He always complained that he couldn't make money because he was an E-class hunter. That's why he's working as an assistant professor for the semester. You're really clueless. That's a lie, man. Do you know how much one earns just by entering the dungeon as a mining team? How much? The senior spoke in a low voice as if revealing a huge secret, and immediately after that, the eyes of the juniors widened. What? They earn that much? Even for E-class hunters? That's right, dude. You're lucky enough if you become a low-level hunter. Are you still going to blow this great opportunity? Huh? Wow, being a hunter is really the best. I mean, why is Professor Lim still stuck in here if he's earning that much? He probably wanted to make money in the dungeon and spend it on art. There's nothing better than being a professor in order to see a lot of artworks. That's really awesome. E-class income became much more persuasive than S-class awakening, which was said to be much rarer than winning the lottery. After the seniors' continued persuasion, the juniors quietly put down their hands, holding their cell phones. Well, it's still safe for a while after the blue mist appears. So shall we wait for it, just for a while? You punks. Now we're talking. Besides, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. As soon as the mist comes out, take just one sip and report it. There won't be any danger. After some time, finally, a blue mist began to seep out from the gate. The building suddenly started to shake. Suho, who was in the exhibition hall, raised his head. What's that, earthquake? Something is weird. It feels like the entire space is shaking. However, Suho was the only one who felt it. No one else in the exhibition hall noticed. A student was scurrying into the exhibition hall. Assistant Professor Lim, who was near the entrance, approached him and talked to him. Youngchul, why did you come so late when I told you to go to the storage room and... I tried to stop him. Youngchul? Senior kept on... Park Youngchul? He kept on... Chills. Something's wrong. After checking Youngchul's condition up close, Assistant Professor Lim's expression hardened. His eyes are wandering and lost while he's trembling. He keeps muttering nonsense. Park Youngchul? What's that in your mouth? After Professor Lim asked him, Youngchul finally came to his awareness. Before he knew it, blue smoke slowly seeped out of his mouth and nose. This shouldn't be happening. Youngchul was embarrassed and covered his mouth with his hand. But the more he did, the more smoke came out between his fingers. Along with the hot air, blue smoke engulfed Youngchul's body. Professor! Just in time, Suho, who ran from behind, pulled Professor Lim's body away. It's hot! Professor Lim stepped back and opened his eyes wide. Youngchul's body was engulfed in blue smoke and began to burn. What is that? Students nearby witnessed the terrible sight and screamed in horror. It was then. The school alarm rang through the school speakers. This is an emergency. Students began panicking. A gate has appeared in our school. Gate? The current identified location of the gate is at the museum building. Fuck, it's in this place. Panic arose. Students started to run for their lives. Seeing a person burned to death right in front of their eyes, the horror was indescribable. However, there was one problem in getting out. The place where Youngchul's body was burning was in the middle of the exhibition hall entrance. They had to pass by the body to get out. One of the students running ahead was startled by the heat and flinched. Where are the other exits? He hurriedly looked around, but there was nowhere to be found. There's only one exit. While the students are frightened and wandering around, something unbelievable happened. Huh? That person? Youngchul's body, which had turned into a lump of charcoal, was getting up again, as it was engulfed in blue smoke. Wait, is that perhaps... Professor Lim's eyes widened at the sight. A monster! Get out of there right now! Professor Lim shouted urgently, but it was too late. With the magic of blue mist, the demonic monster took Youngchul's body as a wick and swung its arms like a whip. The students' bodies rolled on the floor while vomiting blood. As the blue smoke clung to their clothes, their bodies also began to burn hot. Fire! Fire! Students scattered in panic. There are desperate cries and screams everywhere. It's a monster, a mistburn. Professor Lim hurriedly took out his cell phone. Mistburn is not something an E-class hunter could handle alone. Suho hurriedly asked Assistant Professor Lim, who sent a request for support. Mistburn? What kind of monster is that? Once we get hit by that creature... Professor Lim bit his lip. We'll turn into something like him. With that, the bodies of the students attacked by Mistburn were on their feet again, surrounded by blue smoke. Chapter 2. The situation got worse. Howling and screaming all over the place, along with the frantic emergency evacuation orders. The Mistburns, which had multiplied in an instant, continued to create new victims. If this goes on, we'll end up like them. Professor Lim screamed in panic. Mistburn is a monster he couldn't catch with the level he has. Of all things, Mistburn was the one that stimulated his most painful trauma. Huh? Professor, where are you going? Suho was shocked. The only hunter here right now, Professor Lim, is running away. Professor Lim, who barely escaped Mistburn's attack, exits the exhibit hall alone. Should I follow him? Suho, who had been thinking for a while, soon moved his body, but towards the direction opposite to where Professor Lim ran off to. Suho ran to the corner of the hall and picked up the fire extinguisher. I don't know if this will work, but he couldn't bear to run away and leave the others. Holding a fire extinguisher, Suho ran to the place where the mist burns were gathered. White powder spurted out and covered the mist burns. Of course, since it's an attack that doesn't contain magical power, there won't be any significant damage. However, it was enough to temporarily suppress their firepower. This will do for now. After confirming that the fire extinguisher was fortunately working, Suho continued to move the tip of the fire extinguisher and sprayed other mist burns as well. He looked around. Suho found his fallen friend and helped him. Are you okay? His friend's face was covered with tears and a runny nose. Hey, get back to your senses! Suho shook his body, but he remained unfazed. He was forced to come to his senses by a slap. Suho? His friend's eyes barely got focused. Suho looked down. Did he get sprained? Let's get out of here first. Suho lifted up his friend and carried him. Thanks to the fire extinguisher, the attacks of the mist burns temporarily weakened. There's no other way to escape from here. Where's the professor? The student asked Suho. All art students knew that Professor Lim is a hunter, but in such a situation no one knows where he is. He asked for assistance from the Hunters Association earlier, though. Suho thinks it's not necessary to mention that the professor escaped alone after that. He could be scared. At Suho's words, a sigh of relief escaped from his friend's mouth. They got out of the exhibit hall, but things didn't stop there. Rather, it's a lot messier outside. They weren't just inside the hall. Suho bit his lip. It seemed like the entire museum was filled with mist burns. Proliferative monsters. They're really terrible. He thought he would just have to get out of the exhibit hall. Help! When are the hunters coming? People were all over the place trembling. The Korean National University Art Museum building has a clear passage, both the stairs and elevators. But mist burns are buzzing all over. At this rate, mankind could be at risk. Suho quickly assessed the situation. All retreat routes are blocked, and the number of monsters is increasing. The situation will only get worse if they turn into monsters by recklessly jumping out of the window or running around. Maybe things will get better if I can give them means to protect themselves. Suho raised the fire extinguisher he brought and shouted, "Everyone, listen up!" Some of the frightened people looked at Suho. There's a way to deal with those. More people then turned their heads his way. They looked at the fire extinguisher in Suho's hand. I see. That's right, fire extinguishers. We can kill the monsters. The light returned to the eyes of the helpless. Suho felt quite embarrassed. It couldn't kill the monsters, though. Well, does it matter? It gave people hope. That is what's important. People scattered and frantically searched for fire extinguishers. Here, I found one. I found one too. The people who found fire extinguishers cheered. At the same time, those who could not find a fire extinguisher became contemplative. There was no way there could be that many fire extinguishers on one floor in the first place. But that was enough. Suho shouted, "Not everyone needs a fire extinguisher. Those with fire extinguishers, please follow me." What? Disappointment flashed on the faces of the people holding the fire extinguishers. They realized that only those who hold fire extinguishers will take the front line of the battle. Suho took the lead and aimed the fire extinguisher at Mist Burns. From now on, action will speak louder than words. Mist Burns' firepower has noticeably weakened. The complexion of the people who saw that brightened. Amazing. Great, I'll do that too. They started spraying their fire extinguishers as they gained confidence. Nice, let's keep moving this way. Suho kept the lead and continued attacking forward. Meanwhile, people followed Suho and moved through the gaps and down the stairs. The problem is, there were also Mistburns attacking from behind. At the back, the people who were barely stable fell into panic again. People ran down the stairs in fear. Suho gritted his teeth. We were almost there. If this continues, they might all collapse down the stairs. Suho put down his friend and asked him, "You can go alone from now on, right?" "Huh? What will you do?" The friend looked at Suho with a confused face. Suho shouted at the people holding fire extinguishers with a firm look on his face. "I'll take care of the back, so those at the front can clear the way." Alright. Suho eventually turned around and climbed the stairs again. I don't know what I'm doing. A person who wasn't awakened began acting like a hunter, but there's nothing he can do otherwise. His body moved ahead. Suho's fire extinguisher attacked the mist burns coming from behind. But then... Huh? Seriously? The white powder that had been spouting vigorously suddenly stopped. Right then, The helplessly pushed mist burn, and Suho's eyes met awkwardly. Suho sneered miserably. I'm doomed. The mist burn came towards Suho. The blue smoke engulfed him. He was also about to become a new mist burn, but right then, at that moment, he came face to face with the mist burn, and fell gradually deep into the abyss as he lost consciousness. Born from remnants of mana, Mistburn was a feeble creature that only moved by instinct. It was also a troublesome monster that could become stronger as long as it had enough to consume and endlessly increase its alter ego, which is best for them to consume. Just simply living things. Among them, humans with abundant vitality were good prey that could burn well like dry firewood. In that sense, Suho was the perfect prey for Mistburn. However, the moment it engulfed Suho's body, the Mistburn fell into a pitch-black abyss hidden within Suho. The bewildered Mistburn looked around. No matter where it looked, there was no end to the abyss. But in the deepest part of the abyss, someone was watching. Mistburn growled ferociously, standing still with the blue smoke. No matter how much it growls, all that comes back is an empty echo. The Mistburn then realized it was not someone, rather, it was the entire abyss looking down on him. It's like drooling over a piece of prey. The abyss opened its mouth wide at the Mistburn, which was startled and tried to run away. Huh? Suho flashed a puzzled expression. The Mistburn that had been attacking him suddenly, the human body, which had been the wick, also collapsed on the spot as ashes. Right then, you got rid of the Mistburn. Secret quest, Courage of the Helpless, has been accomplished. What? Suho's eyes widened at the message that suddenly appeared in front of him. Your level increased. A brilliant light enveloped Suho's entire body. Suho's friend, Kim Dae-hyun, managed to escape outside the museum. Slump. As soon as his limping foot touched the ground outside, he lost strength. Sitting helplessly in front of the art museum, Dae-hyun's gaze instinctively searched for Suho. What about Suho? Have you seen him? Who is that? Ah, that guy. The people remember the student who took the lead and fought with a fire extinguisher. However, Suho was nowhere to be seen. Someone hesitantly opened his mouth. That person went back to attack from behind. No way. He hasn't come out yet. Everyone began mumbling. Someone spoke in a hopeful voice. He's a hunter, so wouldn't he be fine? Suho is not a hunter, Dae-hyun screamed. That fact was even more shocking. What, he's not a hunter? He is not one, but how did he? Their gazes simultaneously turned to the art museum. Suho wasn't able to get out yet. The hunters arrived just in time after receiving the report. In here! Professor Lim, who ran away first, brought the hunters. He let out a sigh of relief when he saw the people who had escaped the museum safely. Ha, such a relief. I guess everyone got out somehow. As an E-class hunter, he convinced himself that he had chosen the best way. But when he saw the people, he felt guilty for being cowardly. By the way, how did you manage to escape? Professor Lim and the hunters looked at the crowd with puzzled expressions. Mistburn attacked such an isolated place, yet a lot were able to survive. As fortunate as it was, they couldn't help but be curious about what had happened. More than that, there is still someone left in there, Dae-hyun shouted desperately. Suho is still... Suho? Suho is still inside? Assistant Professor Lim was taken aback and turned his gaze to the museum. If it wasn't for Suho, we would all be dead. The faces of all the survivors turned gloomy at Dae-hyun's depressing words. Is that person a hunter? What class? He's a civilian. What? How could a normal person do that? Hunters were ready to throw more questions. An ominous roar came from the museum building. Everyone turned their heads toward the sound. Hazy magical power began flowing out of the building. Oh dear. Is disintegration going to start? Chapter 3. Disintegration is a phenomenon in which the blue mist flowing from the gate contaminates the surroundings. Areas contaminated by the magical power of the other world become a good environment for demons to live in. If the area beyond the gate is called a dungeon, the area around the gate that was contaminated is called a field-type dungeon. First of all, this polluted place was like a dungeon, and considering that, the Korea University Museum of Art was like a land of death. I guess that student, the hunter, couldn't say it, but anyone could tell what he was trying to say. On the other hand, Suho, your level increased. Is it that thing? Something unbelievable happened. Letters floating in the air. The level up notice he only saw in his dreams a long time ago appeared in reality. Geez, is this a dream again? No, this is definitely not a dream this time. The vivid sense of reality passing through his skin was proving that fact. In addition, the moment the level up message appeared, the accumulated fatigue he felt had disappeared completely. Even the minor burns caused by the mist burns were all healed. But what is this? Secret quest. Courage of the powerless has been accomplished. There are unread messages. The level up notice he saw in his dreams was only that and nothing else. There was an authentic feeling in it. When Suho looked at the message box opened automatically. There are two unread messages. Welcome to being a player in real life. Unchecked. The quest has transpired. Unchecked. Real life player? He checked the first message first. Secret quest, Courage of the Powerless. You have demonstrated your qualifications by gaining experience while non-awakened. You have now leveled up from level 0 to level 1, and can now check the status window. Information. This system supports the growth of the player. This time it's not tutorial mode. Please note that in reality, you only have one life. Tutorial mode? Was it perhaps my dream? Suho realized instinctively. All the dreams he had in his teens were practice games, and now he's going to play for real. Just like a game, some features that were not available in tutorial mode are now added. For instance, the status window. Information on Suho was briefly displayed on the status window. Just like a game, Suho immediately checked the next message as well. Quest, rescue the victims. There are people waiting to be rescued nearby. Rescue as many of them as possible. The reward depends on the number of people rescued. Current number of survivors, 52. Current number of rescued victims, 0. The second was the quest window. This quest window was also a feature that he had never seen in his dream. The reward varies depending on the number rescued. It was like a real game, except that this is a stark reality. Even at this moment, people are still dying in real life. Current number of survivors, 52 to 51. Current number of survivors, 51 to 50. Suho suddenly came to his senses when he saw this notice board. Right then, he must have been too preoccupied with the status window. A mist burn which came close to him started attacking. You! Suho just swung his arm everywhere. Something incredible happened. Mistburn, who had been hit by Suho's fist, bounced back in agony. Huh? Suho looked at his hand and was even more appalled. He hit the blazing blue smoke with bare hands, but it wasn't even hot. Another mistburn attacked from behind. Suho immediately threw a fist without hesitation. It was the same this time too. Mistburn helplessly bounced backward at Suho's normal punch. At this point, the mistburn was also taken aback. Suho is obviously a person who doesn't look like much, but it hurts when he hits. However, Mistburn is a creature driven solely by instinct. As the Mistburn screamed, more of its kind around the area rushed towards Suho. However, Suho was not shaken in the slightest by the menacing sight, because he realized that the moment they pose no threat to him is the time for him to strike back. Suho charged forward immediately. There's a completely different thing from usual games. The tank originally receives the monster's attack and blocks the front line, while the damage dealer will carry out the strategy while attacking. However, Suho ignored all that and just swung his fist toward the monsters. Still, the effect was certain. You have killed a Mistburn. You have killed a Mistburn. You have killed a Mistburn. Suho kept moving, defeating them one by one. Current number of survivors, 37 to 36. In the meantime, the number of survivors continued to decrease. This means that the number of Mistbuns increased. The higher their numbers, the faster people will die. He must hurry. Suho scoured the museum for survivors. Get out of here! He searched all corners of the art museum and sent them out. Current number of rescued victims, 12. What? How are these people escaping? The hunters outside the museum were shocked. They were just checking the equipment before going in, but people kept coming out one by one. Someone saved me. A student inside helped me. The hunters who heard them were even more surprised. Who could be fighting the monsters inside? Is another hunter already in there? Hearing this, Professor Lim shook his head. There's no way. Not only that there are no hunters among the students, but the other hunters haven't arrived yet. Daehyun, who was listening next to him, said in a hopeful voice. Could it be Suho? Suho? Assistant Lim and the hunters, doubtful at those words, exchanged glances with each other. The odds of an ordinary person surviving in a field-type dungeon were extremely rare, but they couldn't bear to tell Daehyun that his friend could be dead. However, one of those who just escaped knew Suho. That's right, Senior Suho saved us. What? Suho? How on earth? He's beating up the monsters with a bare fist. Bare fist? The words made the hunters feel sorry. Those people must have seen it incorrectly out of fear. Fighting Mistburn with bare fists was too risky. His hands would burn. It's a suicide move. Unless you are a hunter who can cover your fists with magic, at least you must protect your hands with a gauntlet to avoid getting burned. It almost sounded certain that a student named Suho was alive and saving people. The hunters murmured with serious expressions. Maybe that student has awakened? Suho awakened? Professor Lim turned his gaze towards the museum. Even at that moment, victims rescued by Suho were still coming out. The hunters murmured with serious expressions. Team leader, we're done measuring the mana. It seems to be a D-class dungeon. All right, we must hurry. Knowing that it was a D-class dungeon, the hunters felt more determined. If it were a D-class dungeon, there would be monsters much stronger than Mistburn. Even if Suho, a student, had just awakened, no one could guarantee how long a beginner with no dungeon experience could hold out in there. You have killed a mistburn. After clearing all visible mistburns, Suho let out a deep breath. Almost done. He was so exhausted he wanted to lie down, but his mind was empty. Your level increased. Suho's whole body was wrapped in transparent light and energy surged into his body. I'll be able to continue with this much. The moment Suho tries to find the remaining people and move forward, suddenly the ceiling exploded. Piles of stones scattered in all directions, along with a huge amount of dust. Suho was startled and rolled on the floor, but he couldn't avoid it. Red blood flowed from his forehead, where his previous wounds had just healed when he got into level 2. But that wasn't the problem. A giant wolf descended from a hole in the ceiling. As soon as Suho saw that enormous thing, he stood up. I can never win against this, he thought while looking at it, a survival instinct that all living things possess. He felt an instinctive fear that was different from Mistburn. The giant wolf arrogantly looked down at Suho. Its eyes looked at the wounded prey with nowhere to run. A tremendous sense of intimidation oppressed Suho. Suho clenched his teeth. I had no intention of coming this far, only to be weighed down by fear. I'll just do whatever I can. If I can't escape, I'll attack first. Suho took a rock he could get his hands on and threw it at the opponent. However, the giant wolf raised its front foot and shook off the attack as if it were so ridiculous. Now! Suho jumped towards it quickly. Then he swung the fist that had killed dozens of mistburns. It wasn't enough. The giant wolf bit Suho on the shoulder. Suho clenched his teeth and hit the wolf on the head with his body bitten. That was also insufficient. In the end, Suho was thrown to the ground. His body was pressed down by the giant wolf's front paws. It was a losing fight to begin with, knowing that the wolf enjoyed the victory as if it were only natural. Just as the wolf's ferocious teeth were about to bite Suho's neck, it was then a miracle happened. From a distant universe, suddenly a black bolt of lightning struck vertically from the sky above. The ceiling exploded, and a space between the giant wolf and Suho separated them apart. As the dust cleared, the Ant King appeared with its whole body covered with black haze. Beru, max level, martial class. Beru was looking down at Suho, holding down the wolf's mouth with one hand. Chapter 4. Suho was greatly shocked. The monster that suddenly appeared was wrapped in a pitch-black exoskeleton-like armor, and black haze flowed from its entire body. It formed into a giant ant with wings. The black smoke billowing nonstop from his body was like a shadow swaying in the light. The moment Suho saw it, certain memories passed through his mind. Was it ever in my dreams? He was so sure it was some sort of witchcraft. All kinds of ant creatures appeared in his dreams for a long time. So that's what their master looked like. But what is this? The Ant King suddenly approached Suho and knelt down on one knee. Young master, I, Beru, have arrived now. You are now safe. Who? Suho's eyes widened. What does that mean? It was so huge that Suho had to look up even if it was on its knees. But Suho stood up. Before Suho could say anything, the black monster's expression changed. He discovered Suho's body in a state of ruins after being attacked by a giant wolf. The black monster raised its head, bursting into a storm of flesh from its entire body. How dare you bite this precious noble body? I'll rip your mouth open. A loud roar came out of its mouth, enough to shake the whole building. At that moment, the world turned into hell. A horrible prowess that engulfed the wolf's body. The giant wolf that had been trampled on by the black monster raised its head with courage. Then it bit off the black monster's leg. The monster then looked over to the giant wolf. You dare try to overcome me? It boiled in rage. The black monster kicked the giant wolf quick enough and hit the latter's torso. The giant wolf bounces back helplessly as it screams. The monster again outpaced the wolf and slammed the huge one to the ground. It then grabbed the wolf's legs with both hands and torn its body into two. Black blood splattered in all directions along with a desperate scream. It was no longer a battle, just one-sided slaughter. The tyranny of a predator. The overpowering predator let out another maddening roar as it trampled the wolf's carcass. That brutal murder stiffened the entire body of the hunters who had just entered the first floor of the art museum. What the hell was that? They said it was a D-class dungeon, but what is this? The building was shaking as if it would collapse at any moment. What is this? For some reason, Suho wasn't afraid of that cruel monster. Instead, it seemed like he was longing for its presence. It gave him a nostalgic feeling digging deep into his hazy memory. What's this? I feel like I remember something. In a faint memory, he could hear the voice of a child who liked to draw ants on a sketchbook. Who was... A sudden excruciating headache struck him. In the midst of this confusion, he was sure of one thing. I guess I'm still alive. Body strength 1/140. As all the tension was released from his body, Suho collapsed on the floor. Young master, please wake up. Suho felt then. The embrace of the monster, who puts everything aside and runs to hug him urgently, is so warm. A smile formed across Suho's lips as he passed out. You have completed quest, rescue the victims. Number of rescued victims, 33. Your level increased. Suho had a dream. It was a dream about a newborn baby being carried on the back of an ant. The baby in the dream was laughing so much that no one knew what was making him that happy. When the baby laughed, the ant laughed too. There were always ants wherever the baby went. The ant was wearing an apron, holding the baby bottle, and feeding the baby. It was also helping the baby learn the numbers. There was also a part where the ant was taking a nap with the baby covered in a small blanket. If the ant was nowhere to be seen, the baby cried. Quickly, the ant appeared and rocked the crib to soothe the baby. Then, the baby stopped crying and smiled again, as if nothing had happened. The ant, wearing an apron, approached the baby with wide eyes, as if it could shed tears at any moment. Young master, when did you grow so wonderfully? Beru can't help but feel emotional. Then, the baby suddenly grew up and stood in front of the ant in the form of a 22-year-old Suho. Beru looked at him proudly and wiped the tears. My main goal in coming here was to unseal your skills. I didn't know you'd be able to do it yourself. He was so emotional that tears couldn't stop falling. But that's not everything. The most important one is kept here. Beru took out something and held it in his hands. Shadow Dungeon key has been obtained. Shadow Dungeon? What is that? Suho felt a strange feeling at the sudden message. But this is a dream. Beru couldn't hear him at all. The ant squeezed the key into his hand and said, "Please use this key whenever you are ready. It contains everything that should have originally belonged to you, young master." Saying that, Beru got down on one knee and grabbed Suho's shoulder with both hands. "Just keep in mind this one thing," he said in a solemn tone and friendly touch. The two eyes that felt the conflicting emotions were facing Suho. Great power requires a large vessel. When a person who is not prepared is given strength that he cannot handle, his vessel may break without enduring the weight of that force. Great power, large vessel. Suho repeated those words in his mind. It only means you would need a bigger vessel. Beru's eyes narrowed, and then he painted a mischievous smile on his face. Oops. After speaking, Beru stood up again and bowed his head respectfully. Then, young master, my mission ends here. I want to protect you more. But even at this moment, there are others who are waiting for me. Then he winked his one eye. Even if I look like this, I have great skills similar to that of a healer. What? Healer? It was the most absurd thing Suho had heard recently. I will leave now, young master. Until the day we meet again, please. Please stay healthy. Beru's faint voice gradually echoed. Wait, there's more I need to ask. Suho hurriedly called him, but no voice came out of his mouth. At that moment, he woke up. Huh, Ant? Suho jumped up and quickly looked around. White walls and the smell of disinfectant, a calm air surrounded him. Oh dear, you're awake now? The nurse who was adjusting the IV drop looked at Suho. Where? You're in the hospital. Don't you remember? A dungeon appeared in your school. Weren't all those just a dream? Suho got up, but he had a blank expression for a while. From where did I start dreaming? Ant? Dungeon? Or was it leveling up? Everything was unclear to him. Just in time, the news was playing on the TV in the hospital room. 2 days ago, the gate that suddenly appeared at Korea University was almost closed down. Despite the occurrence of a dungeon break in the middle of the city, experts say that the number of casualties is miraculously small. It's been 2 days? Everything that happened in the art museum must have not been a dream. Were my dreams before real too? Suho finally remembered his childhood memories of playing with large ants. How could he have forgotten those happy moments until now? When Suho recalled Beru, whom he had seen in his dream, he felt bummed out. We couldn't even have a proper conversation, yet he left like that. Suho raised his head. The words floating in front of him had been there all along. Quest, rescue the victims has been accomplished. The quest completion reward has arrived. Do you want to check the reward? Yes or no? Yes, Suho confirmed without hesitation. He almost died several times, which he felt was unfair, but it's still right to check on it. These are the rewards that were prepared. Reward 1, ability points plus 5. Reward 2, muscle strength. Stat points plus 3. They're giving me 8 points? It was more than what he expected, so he was surprised. Apparently every time he levels up, his stats seem to go up by 1 point. So the additional stats of 8 points were much more than leveling up once. It was worth risking my life doing good deeds after all. Suho checked the status window right away. Certainly, many features have been added compared to the ones in the dreams he had in high school. Back then, only the level was displayed, and there was no status window of some sort. Which stat do I need to level up? Muscle strength stat of 3 points was applied automatically, but he was wondering where to allocate the remaining ability stats. He did not choose right away, and studied the stats carefully first. An information window then popped up in front of him. Information. Muscle strength. A stat that increases strength and speed. Attack power increases. Agility. A stat that increases body vision and reaction speed. Increases reflexes and defensive rate. Body strength. A stat that increases maximum HP and recovery speed. Intellect. A stat that increases maximum MP and recovery speed. Senses. A stat that increases the sensibility of the 5 senses. Crisis detection ability increases. Looking at all this, Suho finds them equally significant. I'll think about it some more, and make a decision later. After turning off the status window, Suho suddenly felt that he was thirsty. He hasn't drank water for 2 days since he passed out. Suho opened the door of the small fridge next to his bed to get some water. There was something. Huh? Suho's eyes widened. Surprisingly, Beru, who had shrunk to the size of a fist, was slicing an apple inside. You! Beru level 1. Pawn class. Beru, whose enormous body had become very small and cute, held out an apple with a shy expression. It was shaped like a rabbit. I couldn't go back because I ran out of mana. Chapter 5. Suho looked at Beru with a confused expression. You left just like that, and now you're saying you couldn't go back? Actually, the journey to Earth was very long and difficult. Numerous enemies stood in my way, but I had no strength to go back after ripping them apart. Beru made excuses while looking embarrassed. If His Majesty were by my side, my power would have been charged in an instant, but it was impossible to recharge because he was so far away from here. Suho looked at Beru in silence. Compared to how Beru originally looked, he was far smaller now that he had run out of power. He looks like a doll. Suho picked him up with one hand. Mini Beru looks like a keychain dangling in Suho's hand. He was so light he looked like a prize from a claw machine. Beru continued to chatter while clinging to Suho's hand. I don't know if your memory has returned. Young Master is the only heir to the great and mighty Shadow Monarch. Shadow Monarch? Who is that? Sung Jinwoo. I'm talking about your father, young Master. My father? Yep. Suho doubted his ears for a moment. Father? The one who left home? He did not leave your house. Rather, he went out into outer space. Outer space? Seeing Suho's confused face, Beru talked in a calm voice. Let me explain it briefly. There is a huge war going on in the universe right now. A shadow formed from Beru's hand, made up of black energy, creating a vision. The shadow illusion turned into numerous soldiers the size of a fingernail, and more monsters attacked them. And at the center, there was a man who glowed with a particularly strong energy, of course the size of a nail as well. This war is now being commanded by your great father, Sung Jinwoo. Beru's hand then pointed at the enemies that Sung Jinwoo was blocking. These guys are the henchmen of Ithrim who came to devour our world whole. Ithrim? Ithrim are the gods of outer space far away from Earth. Beru continued talking with a solemn expression. Just vicious and tenacious these guys called Ithrim are. Most of them were just cursed, but anyway, they were enemies who came to invade the Earth. So, you're saying that the demonic monsters that gushed out of the gates from 2 years ago were because of Ithrim? Suho, who was listening to the explanation, felt strange. Both of Suho's parents were missing. They had been reported missing a long time ago, and yet the police never found any clue. It was as if they had disappeared with no traces found. So he had given up halfway and lived on. But now they were just in outer space? It was hard to believe. But the fact that there was a stuffed doll, or talking ant, in front of him was also an unrealistic situation to begin with. Oh well. In a world where monsters and demons exist in dungeons, adding universe stuff into that is nothing more surprising. Suho suddenly asked, what about my mother? Did she also go to outer space? No. Beru flashed a puzzled look on his face. What, she did not? Yes, she didn't. Where did Miss Hyen go? Suho's face stiffened with Beru's reaction. She disappeared on the same day as my father, so of course I thought she went with him. Has Miss Hyen disappeared? When? Where to? It was Beru who was more surprised with the late realization. I have no idea. Suho sighed deeply. Beru flew to Earth from outer space while the war was ongoing. The process was really tough, and not an exaggeration. It was a huge thing to leave for a battlefield alone as the High Commander. He barely managed to get to Earth after overcoming the enormous military force, and now he discovers that the whereabouts of Sung Jinwoo's wife, Cha Hae-in, were unclear. Beru was shocked. I have to find Ms. Hae-in right now. Do you know where to find her? It's obvious who would do this. Ithrim. The apostles of Ithrim on Earth could have set an evil trap for her. Suho's mother, Cha Hae-in, received the protection of the Shadow Monarch, so she shouldn't be in danger. But what if something happened? She must have encountered forces counter to that of the Shadow Monarch's power. Beru made a fuss like that, but Suho was not very worried about his mother Cha Hae-in for some reason. Of course, He was very worried at the time of her disappearance, but the shock of knowing his father's identity was so great that his mother did not look like an ordinary human anymore. Come to think of it, I've never seen my mother become flustered ever since. After all, she decided to marry Suho's father, despite knowing his true identity. No, that was just because parenting was so hard. Beru muttered something next to him, but Suho didn't hear. The kind of mother Chahain was that Suho remembers was always a relaxed and unwavering firm person. Could that be why? It may be just a vague belief, but he couldn't imagine his mother to be in danger. Still, it was very fortunate to find a clue to his parents' disappearance, which had been an open case for so long. Beru, what can I do to find my mother? With that question, Beru shouted strongly while hanging onto Suho's hand. Of course, you need to become strong as soon as possible. Become strong? Yes, His Majesty cannot come to Earth for now because of the ongoing war. The only one who can save Ms. Hein is you, young master. But right now you are weaker than a caterpillar. Caterpillar? Suho was a bit offended. Regardless of whether he was or not, Beru removed all the shadows he had created, escaped from Suho's hands, and soared high into the air. He pointed at Suho's and chuckled. That's why you should level up. The quest has arrived. At that moment, a message window appeared in front of Suho's eyes. Quest, Trials of the Shadow. You are the son of the great Shadow Monarch. But right now, all of your innate skills are sealed. You will have to prove your qualifications to receive that great power. Enter the Shadow Dungeon and prove your worth. Shadow Dungeon? The quest window unfolded before his eyes. As soon as Suho read that, he remembered the Shadow Dungeon key that Beru handed over in his dream. The Shadow Dungeon is the realm of peace given to the young master. It is the land of the dead, where the living cannot set foot without the owner's permission. Please open inventory. Right then, a translucent window opened in front of him. Inventory, Shadow Dungeon key, unchecked. There's an inventory? It's totally like a real game. It was fascinating. Accordingly, the dream he had was a tutorial. But this time, all the features like the ones in a real game were added. Suho reached out and took the key. Then an information window appeared above the key. Item, Shadow Dungeon key. Obtaining difficulty? Unknown. Type key. This is the key to entering the Shadow Dungeon. Can also be used on Sung Suho's shadow. Can be used on my shadow? Following that explanation, Suho's gaze went down to his feet. He got down on one knee and gently held the tip of the key over his shadow. Strangely, the key went into his shadow. Beru's eyes widened. Come on, go inside and take all the power that should have belonged to you, young master. Wait. Suho pulled out the key again and hurriedly changed his clothes. After taking off the baggy hospital gown and slippers, he found his own clothes and put them on, then tied his shoelaces. A determined light shone in Suho's eyes looking down at his shadow. Great, now let's go. Let's go. I'll be by your side to assist you. Well, even though all my power is gone, Suho didn't expect much. He shoved the key back into his shadow. Do you want to enter the Shadow Dungeon? Yes or no? I will enter. After he answered, Suho's shadow spread all over the place. It began to devour everything in sight, the walls and ceilings, and even the entire hospital building. You have entered the Shadow Dungeon. Before he knew it, Suho had arrived in a black and white world covered in shadows. Here, calm stillness where no human presence could be felt. A dense forest dyed in black and white was waiting for Suho. No, it was actually a ruined city turned into a forest. The outer walls of the towering buildings were covered with moss and vines. Suho suddenly remembered a book he read as a child. The title was probably, Was It the Earth Where Mankind Disappeared? The book was a documentary about the so-called self-purification of Earth. Roughly summarizing the contents, a city that has been neglected and unmanaged for a long time grows grass and trees, tearing down all the buildings, and eventually becoming a forest, just like this place. It also felt like a field contaminated with mana. In the midst of that silence, Beru, who followed Suho, flew up and made a salute. Welcome to the Shadow Dungeon. Is this the Shadow Dungeon? Suho looked around and felt strange. It felt like stepping into an old horror movie. Why does it somehow feel familiar? Like everyone else, it is impossible to keep clear memories during childhood vividly. However, the emotions and atmosphere that he felt at that time still remained deep in his heart, even after he became an adult. This black and white world, which might seem very sinister to some, felt like the most warm embrace of a mother to Suho. Suho's senses stat sent a warning. An axe flew from behind him. The trial has begun, avoid it. Suho moved swiftly upon hearing that and immediately turned around. He kicked as much as he could. After being hit by Suho's kick, a monster tumbled unsightly to the floor. A name tag floated on top of his head like that of Beru's. Goblin spectator, green skin. It was a hideous monster about a meter tall. Spectator? As soon as Suho confirmed its name, his nerves bristled. If it was a spectator, there could be lots of them around. Suho had already fought numerous battles in his dreams when he was a teenager. The survival instinct engraved in him moved his body. I need to kill it because it could attract more of its kind. Suho threw it around before it could even get up. It's dangerous with bare hands. Goblins are weak creatures, but right now young master is weaker. I know. Suho proceeded and hit the goblin spectator's hand, making it drop the axe. You're doing great, really great. Beru flew upwards and clapped excitedly. Ah, so noisy. Item Imp's stone axe has been obtained. Suho swung the axe as soon as he grabbed it. You have killed the goblin spectator. Suho cut off the goblin's head at once, but there was no time to rest. A chilling sound of wind came from behind. I knew it, there's more of them. Arrows were flying in the air. Suho instinctively stretched out his hand. Ruler's power! At that moment, a transparent hand extended from Suho's hand and caught the flying arrow. Is that power, perhaps? Seeing the arrow stopped in the air, Beru was so happy that he didn't know where to look. As expected, young master, you finally awakened the power you had when you were a kid. Beru exclaimed. It was his ability to walk on air when he was a baby.